Hi, Steve Quinn here with LivewickMedia. Welcome to part 45 in the First Things series. This is based on a book that I made for myself called First Things, which you can get at LivewickMedia.com and print your very own copy if you want. And the purpose is and was to help me understand the most important things in the New Testament, to align with those truths, and by the Spirit of God working in me, His grace, His power, live those things out day in and day out. And so we're going to continue this series. We're talking about the message of the gospel, and we're in the book of Romans. And Romans is a wonderful dissertation given by the Spirit of God on what the will of God is for people. And we're going to pick it up in Romans chapter 3, and verse 19. It reads this way. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by observing the law. Rather, through the law, we became conscious of our sin. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. And now we're in the verses that are actually in the First Things book. Verse 22. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And all are justified freely by His grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of His blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate His justice, because in His forbearance He had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate His justice at the present time, so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. Where then is boasting? It is excluded. Because of what law? The law that requires works? No, because of the law that requires faith. For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from observing the law. Now, I'll give you a reference that's good to read along with this. 2 Corinthians 5:21. 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. So what we find in this passage is probably very familiar if you've been a Christian for a long time in a particular theology that emphasizes biblical salvation. This would be something very familiar to you, but it may not be very familiar to you. That's why we want to take time to go into these things, because these are the first things, the most important things in the New Testament. And they need to be crystal clear for all of us. So here, by the Spirit, the Apostle Paul is writing to people who know the law of Moses. He's talking about how there is a righteousness, verse 21, that is apart from the law, a righteousness that exceeds and is different from a righteousness of your own doing. In the Judaism of Paul's day, there was a lot of emphasis on works, of doing the right things, and that got you favor with God. Notice in verse 22, he says, this righteousness to which the law and the prophets testify, this righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. This righteousness, this right standing is a gift to all who believe. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We're all justified freely by His grace. Verse 25, God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of His blood to be received by faith. So very clearly, this right standing, this righteousness with God in the gospel, the good news that Paul taught and preached, is a righteousness that comes through faith. Now, through this teaching, we're going to unpack what faith is, what righteousness is, what it means to believe. And as I've said in previous episodes, a lot of verses in Romans have been sort of picked, one here, one there, to present a gospel message. And you can get a distorted view of what the good news is, what the gospel is, if you don't see how all the pieces relate to one another. God has always looked for an integrated life for his people, all the way back to the beginning in Genesis and all the way through to the end of time and beyond. God, he made us so that we would love him. He loves us and he wants us to love him back. He wants this integrated life. There's nowhere in the scriptures at all, anywhere, where you find this idea of just say certain words and you get your get out of hell free card, or just say certain words and poof, you've done everything God ever wanted you to do. That's it. You don't find that. Instead of making a faith declaration of putting our faith in Jesus, the resurrected Messiah, being the end, what you see in the New Testament is that's the beginning. And what we're looking at here today is one of the most core principles there could ever be. And it is simply this: right standing with God is not obtained through how hard we work and trying to bring something to God. Look how good I've become. Now will you accept me? Look how good I've become. Am I good enough? Or I'm better than that person or better than that person. That is the wrong way to think about it. God is looking at everybody. Here in Romans 3, those who knew the law of Moses, those who didn't, all people. And you're not going to be declared righteous by observing the law. Through the law, verse 20, we become conscious of our sin. Through the law, we become conscious of our sin. In other words, and I'll land the plane here for this particular video, the simple point of this video, and it's so wonderful, is that instead of being assigned a task that you never are sure you've completed, to put enough good in one side of the scale and hope it outweighs the bad that you've done, or 1,000 other ways people think about God, it's very clear here. Whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Gentile, righteousness, right standing with God, is a gift from God that comes through faith. And I'll leave it there. Hopefully you'll check out LivewickMedia.com if you haven't already, and check out everything that's available there. Again, you can print your own copy of First Things if you're so inclined. And we will look forward to seeing you on episode 46. God bless you. Bye-bye.